When you think of Naughty Dog games, what comes to mind? You might think a compelling story, perhaps strong dialogue between well-developed characters, maybe some cinematic action. Of course, there are more, but these are some of the major qualities which have come to define Naughty Dog games, and certainly these have helped establish them as one of the most highly regarded game devs. Controversies aside, no one quite does it like Naughty Dog. So it may come as no surprise that these are some of the same elements that Naughty Dog is planning to put into their next new game after they release The Last of Us Part 1.
This game is big.
Okay.
It's as big as any of our single-player games that we've done, and in some ways bigger. It's got a story. The way we're telling that story is very unique to this game. It's got a brand new cast of characters. It takes place at another place.
Except that Naughty Dog's next game is a multiplayer. Dr. Pooplov here, and today I want to answer the question, how can Factions 2 have a story? And if you're as ready for Factions 2 as I am, then hit that like button so we can spread the Pooplov around the world. But let's get into it. And I guess the best place to start is right here. Yes, these little dots swimming in a petri dish, I believe, are the key to a compelling multiplayer story. Anyone familiar with the original Factions knows that there was sort of a loose story incorporated in that game. Set 20 years after the outbreak, you inhabit the life of a completely random member of either of the two warring factions, the Hunters or the Fireflies, as they battle for supplies or gather intel. Each match represents one day in this battle in a full 12-week journey, and doing well in matches as well as successful completion of challenges allows you to grow your clan. It was honestly a pretty basic and boring metagame in the original. Basically, once you got the trophies and got some of these cryptic notches by your name, it didn't really seem to matter. But what if for Factions 2, this idea was expanded upon and fully realized? Rather than seeing your clan in a petri dish, what if your hard work was reflected in some sort of a hub world specific to your faction? As we've seen in The Last of Us Part 2, the factions that inhabit Seattle have their own home bases, like the stadium for the WLF, the island for the Scars, or even Jackson for the Jackson Survivors. And these kind of bases aren't actually even a new concept for multiplayer games either. You have the tower in Destiny and the base of operations in The Division. And so I think Factions 2 could operate similarly. The factions in San Francisco can have their own base where players can go to stock up on gear, perhaps train with some target practice, collect missions, but more importantly for a story, it could be a place to meet actual members of your faction where you can interact and learn about their backstories and the lore regarding your faction of choice. And just like the original Factions, your success or failure in a given match, in completing certain challenges, could have a real impact on how populated the base is, and it can allow your actions to drive the story of your faction forward. And so keeping Destiny and The Division in mind when it comes to story, this game could also have a small co-op campaign. This can allow you and a squad of friends to meet characters that exist within the city and complete missions within an open world San Francisco. There could even be a separate story depending on which faction you choose, drip feeding you lore for that particular faction. And it would even be cool if some of these missions were actual PvP specific missions that required you to face off against players of the opposing faction in order to advance the story. Every time there would be a new update, you could get fed a new piece of a larger developing story arc. And I'm just gonna say it, if there are raids in this game, I don't think I would need another video game to play for as long as I live, but that might be asking for too much. Of course, I think Naughty Dog may also be taking a page from another popular multiplayer franchise when trying to develop a story for this game. And yes, I do mean Fortnite. We know that the devs love battle royales, and even that Fortnite has been an inspiration as they develop their games. And if you look at the concept art, it appears that San Francisco is being overrun by a spore cloud, which could serve as the storm in a faction's battle royale. And so while I do think a battle royale is coming, I think more importantly for story, Naughty Dog may be looking to have live events and seasons in which major things happen that change the world or the rules of the game. Perhaps a new mutation of infected emerges and creates an interesting new challenge for players. Or perhaps a new faction arrives into town, which complicates the dynamics. These could serve as major story beats that have larger impacts on the playable world. And hopefully these can be tonally aligned with the Last of Us world, because I really don't want to see a Travis Scott concert. And then of course, the map itself can also be fleshed out with environmental storytelling, much that we've come to expect from the typical Last of Us games. In many ways, I think Factions 2 can serve as a way to even further flesh out the world of The Last of Us in ways that the main storyline simply could not. Questions could be answered like, how has society as a whole devolved? How have these factions actually formed? And in what ways have groups of survivors tried to live their best normal lives? The environment can really help to tell this story, but so too can some of the other methods of storytelling that I outlined in this video. And so yeah, this game has some tremendous narrative potential, and I think it can be so much more than the original Factions ever was, as long as they're able to do it right. But let me know what you think the story of Factions 2 could be. And if you want to see me explore what made the original Factions so underrated, you should check this video out. But otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.